What is the strangest thing you've seen that you cannot explain? When I worked in the medical field, I had a dream one night about a patient of mine, a very kind elderly woman, whom I visited once or twice a week. In the dream she came to me, dancing, and called out to me that she wasn't hurting anymore. I was so happy watching her dance after seeing her decline for years. When I got to work the next morning, I told my coworkers about the dream, and later that morning we got the call from her daughter that she had passed away the night before. I cannot explain that, but I am glad I had told my coworkers about it before the call and not after, otherwise they'd never have believed me. Such a bizarre experience, but so wonderful to feel she was at peace. Fall 2009, I was sick, like super sick. It was a few weeks before my amputation and I was battling a severe bone infection. I was hopped on all kinds of antibiotics. I had a PICC line and would dose my antibiotics through these little balls, and pain medication. I'm a huge Yankee fan, so my best friend got us tickets for the ALCS game at Yankee Stadium. She pushed me around the stadium in a wheelchair with a shit ton of blankets and me, it was freezing, just to put a smile on my face. My friend leaves our seats to go get some hot dogs and stuff. This is where it gets weird. As soon as she leaves, to my recollection, an older Irish gentleman sits by me. He offers me some of his spiked hot chocolate, but I said no thanks and explained that I was on a lot of medication. We begin talking and I told to him what was going on with my life. He asked if I was scared to have my leg amputated, and I told him that I was. I was really frightened of the unknown. He gave me some pretty valuable life advice and comforted me. He assured me that it would be fine. He told me that, if you have to be an amputee, try to be the best amputee that there is. My friend comes back with food and asks who I was talking to. There's no one next to me. I guess I must have hallucinated this, but IDK. It felt more like some kind of angel or being that came to me to let me know it would be okay. I guess my guardian angel is an Irishman with spiked hot chocolate. ETA. Not sure if this makes it more creepy or not, but the Yankees were playing the Angels in that series. I once met this young homeless guy, probably about 10 years ago. Acted like he knew me. When I said I had no idea who he was, he said, "Isn't your name Beardmonger and you work in radio broadcasting?" I got right freaked out cause I had been applying to colleges for radio and there was no reason for him to know my name. I said no, but I've wanted to work in radio. Who are you? He responded saying it wasn't important and to ignore him as sometimes he gets confused between the present and the future, and just left. I never saw him again. It threw me off completely. I abandoned the idea to go into radio almost out of fear. I was driving home from work on the back roads and was driving behind a car that was the same make, model, and year of my car, just a different color. Further down the road, we both get into the turn lane to turn left onto a long, straight road with open fields on either side. The car in front of me turns onto this road and I wait for a car to pass, and then turn as well. It takes less than 5 seconds. However, when I turn onto the road, the car that had been driving in front of me was nowhere to be seen. This road has no turnoffs and it's long and straight so you can see pretty far ahead of you. The car had just vanished and I still think about it today. I have a dash cam now, but I wish I had had one back then because I question what actually happened that day. Edit. I am 100% sure the car didn't do a U-turn. The roads are really narrow, so they wouldn't have been able to complete the U-turn without having to make it a 3-point turn or drive partly in the field. I also would have noticed because while there was enough time to complete a 90-degree turn in front of the car that was coming from the other direction, there was nowhere near enough time to complete a 180-degree turn without either causing a wreck or something. After I turned onto this road and noticed the car was no longer in front of me, I looked all around me and could see the other car driving away behind me, but the car that looked like mine was nowhere to be seen. There was nowhere on that road where the car could have pulled off or I would have seen it. It was still very light outside, around 6:30 in June, and the road was surrounded by cotton fields, I believe, which do not grow high enough to cover a car. I have gone through every possible explanation and there just isn't a logical one. Squirrel wearing a leaf cape. 4 Amish men in a room counting money with a money counter while simultaneously weighing out my ounce of. Just wasn't what I was expecting. I saw a beer bottle dropped from a 13th floor window into bricks and it bounced. Standing outside of a convenience store, I saw two different cars park about a minute or so apart and go in the store. It was obvious the two didn't know each other, at least it seemed. After shopping, they each left in the other's car. Still can't explain it today without going down the CIA conspiracy route. A very badass Great Dane I knew, a former neighbor's dog, was so afraid of a month-old kitten that he ran into the deepest room of his home and didn't stop quivering and whimpering for several hours. For context, he wasn't a timid dog. Little over a month before the mentioned incident, a man attempted to break into their home at night and the dog bit half of his left foot off. P.S. Rest in peace, Scoob. I was having a sleepover at home with a friend from school. We were watching a film and suddenly the weirdest thought comes to me. Her dog has just passed. Obviously I cannot just blurt that out, so I weirdly ask in the middle of the film, "Hey, by the way, how was your dog?" She was quite surprised obviously. I had never met her dog and she doesn't talk much about it, she just mentioned she had one. She answered that he is aging but well. We moved on but I couldn't shake a weird feeling. Anyway, she goes home the next day and calls me after a while. She asked, "Why did you ask about my dog yesterday? How did you know? He passed away last night, around the same time you asked about him." I was both shocked and unsurprised at the same time. I don't have an explanation. It seems like a weird coincidence since her dog was not something usually on my mind. It never happened to me again. I was driving away from a gas station. Out of nowhere a guy in a suit comes running up to my minivan and starts yanking the door. As if he knew me, he began pleading, "See, man, let me in." Luckily my doors were locked. I asked him who the he was through my window. He looked genuinely surprised that I wouldn't let him in. After I refused to let him in, his expression inverted, as if he just realized something horrible. He let go of my car, said something to the effect of, "You're one of them, aren't you?" Then he ran away behind the gas station and into the woods. Full suit and tie, nice shoes, extremely frantic in nature, zero explanation. I'm praying it was some elaborate troll or something, because the look in that man's eyes was pure terror when I didn't let him in. Was sitting in my lounge room alone one night watching TV. Heard clear as day someone coming up the stairs barefoot. I thought it was just a family member coming up the stairs but then had the realization that I was home alone. For some reason I just sat there looking at the doorway waiting for whatever was coming up these stairs to walk through the door. Heard the staircase creaking and everything. Heard the bare feet get to the top of the stairs, step onto the tiles and take the 3 to 4 steps it would take to be inside of the doorway to the lounge room I'm sitting in. But nothing came through the door. Sat there for about 5 seconds waiting. Said to myself out loud, "Dealing with that right now," and kept watching TV. I've heard other things like glass moving and footsteps and all that, but the second most notable thing I can't explain was me and my mum hearing something talk to our dog downstairs in a like mumbled male voice we couldn't understand. If I heard that on my own I'd have just thought it was my brain playing tricks, but my mum also heard it. Went hiking late at night with my buddy when something big and bright flew right over us above the tree line. It was so bright we couldn't even look at it, and whatever it was it didn't make a sound. Actually it was probably the most quiet moment of my life. I remember saying, "What the?" quote, but no sound came out of my mouth. Only lasted a few seconds and it was over. My 3-year-old daughter walked up to my husband one night and straight up said, "Grandpa's dead." Few moments later we get a call from my husband's sister saying that their father had passed away. Happened a few months back. Still creeps me out. I was driving one night in a really foul mood and speeding. Like when I say speeding I mean at least 25 over the limit. Anyway, this car gets behind me and for some reason I can just tell it wasn't a cop. It was a full tinted Chevy truck with weird lights on it, like comically large aftermarket front headlights. Once it got behind me I got a really eerie feeling I can't explain. Like my body just knew something was wrong. Anyway, I figured if it was a cop they would light me up for speeding, but for some reason they just kept pace with me, also speeding themselves. So at this point I'm getting a little weirded out, so I turn off the freeway and they follow me. I turn into a gas station and get out. I figure if I'm going to get axe murdered, at least the cameras will pick it up and give my family some closure. Something just didn't sit right with me. I knew something was up. As I'm getting out of my car, the truck rolls its windows down. And what I saw still haunts me to this day. It was a heavily disfigured guy, the only likes of which I can compare to that guy Rocky Dennis from the movie about the guy with a crazy disfigured head who falls for that girl who loves him for him and not the abomination that is his face. And he starts to motion me with his finger like telling me to come closer. I don't care if he was going to give me the winning Powerball numbers, there was no way in. I was going to approach his car. I bolt inside the gas station. At this point my whole body is shaking. I try and tell the clerk what's going on as they stare at me, probably thinking I'm or high off my, as my story doesn't make any sense. I go to look outside and the truck is gone. I still have nightmares to this day. Was driving home from work one afternoon with my brother and cousin in the car. As we were sitting in traffic, I noticed high up in the sky and way out in the distance a small motionless black square. I pointed it out and both my brother and my cousin spotted it quickly, so I know it wasn't in my head. It just remained still for about 45 minutes and then the sun had set and it was too dark to spot it any longer. It just stayed in the exact same spot the whole time, and while it was really far away you could still tell it was a perfect square shape. Once I got home I went online to see if there were any mentions of it anywhere and there was nothing. To this day I still think about it and wonder. I was looking at. When I was young, my parents and I relocated across the country to Maine. We lived in a very small town and our house was old, beat up and on many acres deep in the forest. It had 2 stories, with the top story being the main level and the bottom story being the bedroom level. My bedroom had several large windows that looked out into the forest. I don't remember having curtains or blinds, but I'm sure I must have, because my mother never forgot details like that when decorating my bedrooms as a child, but I must have left them open one night. I remember waking up in darkness, with a faint glowing orb of light hovering just outside my window. I watched it in utter terror as it went slowly across one window, and then the next, before pausing, flashing briefly into my bedroom, before shifting into the third and final window and disappearing altogether. I was so upset by the ordeal that I went and woke my parents up, and my stepfather stormed the backyard with his gun in hand. There was nothing and no sign of the strange orb. My eyes are watering as I write this. Deep down, as an adult looking back, I realized that orb was anything but magic. It was someone's flashlight. It never happened again, but I'm still afraid of having window blinds open at night. When me and my best friend were teenagers, we were walking home during the wee hours of the morning when a guy basically acted like we knew him and invited us to eat. For some reason, we actually came with him and we ate at this 24/7 joint, where he told us about his adventures around the world, showed pictures, etc. We hung out until it was around 5 a.m. and walked home together. I have no idea who he was. I still don't. My grandfather told me a really cool story. There's a couple of things that grow or rot in trees that glow. Google Foxfire. He saw an owl completely covered in this stuff flying around at night sometime in the 1930s. Edit. Ye blew up. Thanks for all the glowy stories. I miss my grandpa. And for the lulz, I didn't even think of Mozilla. My dad, sister and I all saw something that wasn't an animal and wasn't human. This was in winter 2015 in rural Saskatchewan. We were driving and it ran out in front of us on the road. It was so fast it was a dark blur, but we all agree we saw long gangly limbs like a deer, but it had human-looking arms and legs. We still talk about it. I was once standing in line at Target. A mother and her, I guess, 3-year-old were in front of me in the checkout lane. I never met them before in my life. The child was riding in the shopping cart and the mother went forward to better unload it. The child looks dead at me, smiles, laughs and said my first name, very clearly, twice. I have an uncommon first name, which made it even stranger. Edit. No, we didn't have name tags. Just blank white keycards for entering locked areas. The dress code was strictly professional suit and tie. On weekends, I never was into being some company's walking billboard. It's a thing that happened to me firsthand. As a kid I went to the kitchen downstairs late at night to get some snacks for midnight gaming. There was this bowl of candy on top of a shelf that my parents didn't think I knew about, so I grabbed a chair and had to stand on my toes to reach it. The bowl slipped from on top the shelf onto the floor, and I held my ears knowing there would be a sound of shattering glass in the middle of the night silence, and I thought my parents would wake up and be mad at me. But there was no sound and no trace of the glass bowl or any candy at all on the floor. I was so flundered, so I just sat on the chair staring at the floor for a while before going back to my room wondering what the just happened. A few days later my mom was looking for the bowl, but it was nowhere to be found, and I never told anyone as they would just think I was crazy. Edit. Wow, first time I get this many upvotes. Thanks guys. I don't know how awards work, but I see that I got one. If it means you spent money to give it to me, I am thankful. But please kindly consider donating it to a local shelter. Edit. From reading the comments, occurrences of this kind seem more common than I could have guessed. Interesting. Please continue to share your versions. Smiley face. Outside my bedroom window was a paddock, and one morning I saw a rabbit running across towards the woods behind the paddock. It was a minimum of 5 foot tall. Edit. A little more detail in response to some common theories. It was bigger than a Flemish. I know they can get over 4 feet when stretched, but this lad was closer to 5 while still all hunched up. I had been awake for over an hour, so it wasn't a dream. My ex was with me and saw it as well. Same exact description as me. It was the brownish gray of a wild hare. The most rational explanation I can come up with, but still don't believe, is that it was a large gray kangaroo and was missing its tail. That would make it look more rabbit-like and could explain the way it moved. Question mark. A long time ago, when I was in preschool, school had just ended and I was the first one, adult or child, at the exit, which was a tall gate with one of those C-shaped latches that slips over a pole to keep the gate shut. I walked up to it and reached for the latch, but alas, I was very small and the latch was at least 3 feet above me. I stepped back and decided to just wait for the adults to come set me free, but then the latch just lifted and the gate opened. I saw it clearly. There was nobody around and no one touched it. Still have no idea what that could have been. Childhood telekinesis, who knows? I was around the age of 10 and my younger sister was 7. Usually, whenever my sister was scared during the night, she would wake me up, and so I would comfort her and tuck her in bed. However, this night was different and she was shaking me furiously and crying, couldn't speak, etc. So I rushed to her room, and after a few minutes she could finally tell me that she could hear faint footsteps up and down the small hallway outside our rooms. Our rooms are opposite from each other in the hallway. So we tried to be quiet and listen for the footsteps and couldn't hear anything, and I thought she must be hearing things, etc. Then after we calmed down, we started hearing the footsteps, and they were actually so clear it sounded like there was someone right outside the room. We both feared that someone broke into the house and was wandering around our house. So, funnily enough, I grabbed a pillow to protect myself and my sister in case the intruder came inside. At this stage, myself and my sister are both crying and nothing is happening. After 2 minutes of hearing footsteps, I gained the courage to scream, "Help!" And I run down to my parents' room on the other end of the house. Wake them up and let them know what happens. Dad checks the entire house plus backyard, nothing. He then goes to sleep. Relieved, I decide to lay in my sister's bed with her so she is less shaken up from the situation. Around 15 minutes later, wide awake, a very loud screech happened in the kitchen for around 2 seconds, like something dragging on our floor tiles. Immediately, we both jump up and scream and cry. It was so loud my parents even woke up to see what it was. We left our room before my parents and saw our wooden kitchen chair somehow dragged on the tiles around 5 meters away from the kitchen table. We were all shocked and could not explain what happened. We thought it might have something to do with the footsteps. This is hands down the scariest thing I have ever gone through. A tiny humanoid creature underwater. To this day I still search the internet in hopes that what I saw was an actual type of fish, but I still haven't found anything. I was snorkeling at the age of 16 off the coast of Australia with my dad. Seeing all the fish was so beautiful. My dad drifted a little far from me, but there was a reef protecting us from any large sharks, so I wasn't scared of snorkeling on my own. I swam down towards the coral to get a closer look at a small octopus when something caught my eye. A human face with an eerie smile and big eyes. It was sort of, standing, casually leaning against the coral with a body about 4 inches tall and head no bigger than a grape. It resembled a human male but had gills by its neck and webbed feet. Smooth all over like a Ken doll. I stared at him. He stared at me. I stared back and tried to rationalize what I was seeing. I reached out to touch him, and he casually evaded me by stepping to the side, all while his creepy smile remained. I could see my dad has turned around and was swimming closer to me. So I called him over to see this crazy creature. The creature turned toward where my dad was swimming over, seemed to notice him, then looked back at me coyly. Then it walked away. Walked on its little webbed feet on the coral and disappeared down through a little hole on the rocks. I tried explaining to my dad when he came over, but he couldn't explain anything like that either. He just said something about Aboriginal spirits and I shouldn't mess with it. I swear I think about that little fish man every day. Okay, I was going to wait until tomorrow to draw this. But I actually could not sleep until I got it out of my head. This is the best I could do. It's goofy looking but still sends chills down my spine to remember. https:// and so forth. I don't know why I read these creepy threads at midnight right before bed. Living in a dorm, no roommate. Night before 2-hour open book final. I put my book in the middle of the floor so I'll stumble over it on the way out. The floor has nothing else on it. In the morning it's gone. I look all over the room, can't find it. I think I'm hysterically blind, so I feel over every inch of the floor with my hands. Nothing. I go get a cup of coffee and come back, still nothing. By now there's only 1 hour for the test. I go anyway and do the best I can. Naturally when I get back the book is in the middle of the floor exactly where I put it. Probably a prank, but how? I'm not that heavy a sleeper. Nobody took credit for it. As a full-grown adult, I was telling my mother about this house I was in with a dream I had. It was brown, had 2 bedrooms, 2 floors, L-shaped stairs. I went into full detail about this house from my dream. Anyway, apparently the house I described was the house I was born in. Not like, born. I was born in a hospital, but the house my family lived in for 2 years prior to my birth, that we all moved out of when I was 7 or 8 months old. At first I thought maybe my brain got it from pictures I had seen, but honestly the level of detail wasn't shown in any pictures we had of me at such a young age. Mostly they were close-ups, so you couldn't really see the background much. Best guess to this day is my brain picking up really old and obscure memories. Other than that I'm not sure how TF I knew anything about this house, let alone the layout, furniture setup, etc. I'll preface this by saying I don't really believe in the paranormal or superstitions, although I find these topics super interesting, but something really weird happened one night after leaving a movie theater with a friend that I've never been able to rationalize. We had just watched a horror movie as well, so we were definitely in that spooky mood. During our drive home out of the city, I lived in the country, we counted 3 cars pulled over in different areas on the road. As we get onto the highway we count about 8 more, in various locations, all a decent distance apart, so it's not like they're yielding to an ambulance or something like that. We get about halfway to my house and we ended up counting a total of 12 cars before my friend freaks out and begs me to take a back road. He was convinced it was a sign that we may get in a collision or a road accident of some kind. We were silent the rest of the ride home. I've brought it up to him once or twice since then and he gets really defensive and shuts it down immediately. It really bothered him. It's definitely weird and I can't explain it, but it makes for an interesting story. Not exactly seen, but it's strange. I was around 6 and on Wednesday evening I went to bed. I woke up and it was Friday. I remember asking my mom why is it Friday when yesterday it was Wednesday. She said yesterday was Thursday, obviously. I asked her what I did on Thursday because the last thing I remember is going to sleep on Wednesday. She named some activities and I remembered none of that. I never found out why I don't remember the Thursday. I used to work nights. It was a fairly simple job and I was pretty much alone in an abandoned building. I was basically security to prevent people from coming in and clearing people out if there were any. Occasionally you'd get some teens hanging about, the odd homeless person or some YouTubers filming, but nothing out of the ordinary. I understand that the night in your brain can play tricks on you in the dark and when you're tired, but I don't know how to explain what I saw and I'm sure there is a logical explanation for it. I just went into a room, it was pretty much empty. I saw 3 shadows on the wall, but there was nothing to explain how the 3 human shadows were there. It was just really creepy and I got really bad vibes. So I just went out and I saw a very tall, slim, not of this world figure on the other end of the hallway, so that was me done. I know there's probably a reasonable explanation for it, but it was certainly unexplainable at the time. It wasn't what I saw so much as felt. I was on my way to Petersburg, a small island in Alaska, but the runway was too foggy, so I had to stay in Juneau at a hotel for the night. Anyway, the next morning I was sleeping and had my hand dangling in between the bed and the wall, and I swear on everything I felt something grab my hand. It had a grip like a very firm handshake, and it literally woke me up out of a dead sleep. I actually got up and checked under the bed and nothing was there. It was very weird. So in 2013, I was smoking a cig with my buddy and his schizophrenic neighbor in Denton, Texas. This neighbor was the nice kind of off, never acting mean or violent. So we were actually pretty good friends. Anyway, during the middle of the cig, the neighbor acts like he just got hit with an energy wave, and runs out into the yard. He begins to start rhythmically dancing and chanting about the meteor. What I could understand was that he felt the meteor, and he said that he felt it falling, and then with a final. He said the meteor had exploded. At that same time, on the other side of the world, an enormous meteor exploded over Russia. Asterisk asterisk, https:// and so forth. If you are wondering, no, there was no advanced warning. And yes, part of me does suspect that he somehow knew. I was taking a trip with my then girlfriend and we had to cross the Hudson River to get to where we were going. There are only a handful of bridges across, and I know them all from having grown up in the area. On that particular trip we were supposed to take the Bear Mountain Bridge, but I got off the wrong exit and passed it. We decided it wasn't a big deal. The next bridge, the Newburgh Beacon, was actually closer to where we were going. It would just bring us over a little bit past our destination, but not enough to really matter. So we kept on driving, not really paying specific attention to where we were since it was probably 20 to 30 minutes until we got there. Well, we never crossed the Newburgh Beacon that day. We also never crossed the Bear Mountain. And we certainly didn't drive an extra half an hour to the mid-Hudson or turn around and go back to the tap. When we did take a minute to check where we were, and how close the bridge was, we found we were already on the other side of the river. No bridge, we were just already there. So either there's a secret tunnel somewhere under the river, we had our memories erased, or we found some kind of spatial rift somewhere in the Hudson Valley. I was half asleep and something grabbed my feet. I jumped up and seen a little girl run out the room. My 2 dogs both looked at the little girl and watched her leave the room and looked at me as if to say, "Did you see that?" Then chased her down the stairs into the living room. I followed behind them. When we got to the living room there was no one there. The only explanation I have is I was still dreaming while awake. 1. I have dreams about people, situations, or just rooms that I've never seen or been. Then usually years later I find myself in the room, or with the person, or in the situation. The memory is only about a second, just enough to go, wait, I did this before, and I remember it just ahead of real time. 2. Also, I have injured my knees a lot and I noticed the feeling I had the last couple times before. It was an uneasy sorta light feeling the whole day before I was at the place or situation when I got injured. Then I would get hurt again. I was in RA when I was in college. All the RAs would come back a week before the winter semester started for training, which meant no students were back in the dorms. We were the only ones in the building. One night, I heard the door to my shared bathroom open. The sound of the doorknob turning woke me up, so I kind of groggily said my suitemate's name. She would sometimes come through the bathroom to talk or ask me for advice. Then I realized, my suitemate was on an extended holiday in Italy, so no one should have been in our suite at all. I immediately shot up and looked toward the bathroom door. It was almost pitch black in my room, but next to the bathroom door, I could see the perfect outline of a human face wearing a flat-brimmed hat. I couldn't see the details of the face, but I could see shadows where the eyes, mouth, and nose would have been. It was as if someone was standing next to the door, staring at me. I had no idea what to do, because no one was back in the dorms. I knew that the nearest RA was 2 floors away and wouldn't hear me scream for help. I stared at the face for a few seconds, and it stared back, then I shifted slightly on the bed and it completely disappeared. I got up to check the door, and it had been closed the whole time. It's been almost 7 years and it still freaks me out when I think about it. I once saw someone who looked and dressed exactly like me, with my mannerisms and posture, standing outside a pub I had visited only a week earlier around the same time in the evening. He was finishing a smoke and went back inside a few seconds after I'd been able to notice and get a good look at him. I smoked at the time as well, so it was something I'd have been doing. Not sure if I saw a glimpse of my own past from a third-person perspective or what, or if I just have a twin somewhere in Dublin. I think this is just a coincidence, but it's weird nonetheless. I can summon, I don't know a better word for it, a boy to message me. It's one specific boy who was a close friend when we were 12 to 13. Once we left to go to high school, we kinda lost touch. I think about messaging him sometimes and usually within 10 minutes I'll get a message from him. It's really bizarre and it only happens with this one dude. Once we didn't talk for a year and then he messaged me randomly after I thought about reaching out. I asked him why he messaged and he said that he felt a weird feeling wash over him and it's like it pushed him to message me. It's really bizarre, although probably just a coincidence. How a friend of mine got his wife. He's a cocky who treats everyone like they are his inferior. His wife is a super cool person, like someone everyone would want to be friends with. The amount of our friends who have asked, why is she with him, is staggeringly high, even his sisters. Cannot be explained. I went kayaking with my family this one time, and while nearing the end of our route I saw this other family about 50 feet away, relatively normal looking, except for this one kid. His face looked weirdly deformed, like he had large black eyes, 2 slits for a nose, and a large downward pointing snout with a black hole on the end. I kept looking back at him and rubbing my eyes to see if I was just going crazy or some. But he just looked like this creepy SCP monster. I didn't dare get closer. I sort of just left and tried to not think about it, but to this day I have no idea what it was to cause that person to look like that in my eyes. Waterville, Washington in 2013. Saw a red light in the sky that did not move in the way a normal airplane would. It eventually made its way to 3 whitish lights formed into a triangular pattern. It was unsettling. When I was younger I used to have this troubled friend. He had his brand new BMW. We used to be bad boys and buy alcohol with fake IDs. We were only 16 but we had a lot of fun just doing nothing, smoking, drinking, dating girls, doing whippets. Think the movie mid-90s almost to a T. Well, one time we got detained by the police. We were just in the wrong area at the wrong time. I was very respectful to the police and my friend was not so much. The female officer pulled me to the side and said, "Look kid, you seem like a respectful young man. Why are you hanging out with this kid? He's bad news. I really think the next time you want to hang out with him, think twice." So the following Friday he said he was going to pick me up and we were going to pick up some booze and hang out with these chicks. I told him unfortunately I can't tonight. I have to stay in tonight. That night he was in a high-speed chase and lost control of his vehicle and hit a curb. His car went straight into an apartment building and he died instantly. Somehow, I ended up running into that police officer again a few weeks later. Which she made a joke that's it not good if she keeps seeing me. I literally busted into tears and just hugged her. I feel like she saved my life. She seemed somewhat confused and I told her what happened. Thank you for reading. This really shocked me at a young age. I was suffering with a brief depression a few years back. It was a really hard time in my life. My family was getting ready to go to a barbecue. I was brushing my teeth and randomly out of my peripheral vision, I saw the torso and arm of a man in a blue and green flannel. I didn't see a face or anything, but I'm fairly certain he put his hand on my left forearm. I looked up and there was nothing there. This really creeped me out, and my mother, who is an extremely devout Catholic, gave me a rosary to see if it would help. I brought the rosary with me when we left, and in the car I started to have an unnatural tiredness where I went into a weird daydream-like state, followed by dark thoughts that really bothered me. Then suddenly afterwards I had this bizarre feeling of sheer peace and clear-mindedness. I felt as if I could die that second and I was happy and content with my life ending at that point. I wasn't suicidal, and I didn't want to die, but I felt as if even if I died in that moment, that things would be okay. After this event my mental health got better, and I feel more put together as a person. I don't know what happened. I'm not sure if what I saw was supernatural or just a figment of my imagination. Or even if I really saw anything at all. Nothing like that has happened since, and I've been in a way better mental state. My grandfather sat on the edge of my bed when I was in the 4th grade and told me a bedtime story. He died before I was born and the only photo of him was in a chest in my grandmother's attic. I hadn't even heard his name before. His life and passing was a sore spot in my family. Years ago, when my wife was pregnant with our 2nd child and about to give birth, my mom came to stay with us for a few days to help take care of our oldest child. One early evening Mom asked for a pen, paper and an envelope. When I gave them to her she wrote on the paper, sealed it in the envelope and gave it to me, saying put this in your pocket and don't open it. You'll know when, she said. 30 minutes later my wife announced it was time to go to the hospital, she was in labor. So we did, and about 9 hours later our 2nd daughter was born at 3:45 a.m. She weighed 8 pounds, 11 ounces and was 20 inches long. This being pre-cell phone days, I called my mom from the hospital to tell her the news. She answered the phone and immediately said, "Before you say anything, open the envelope." I did. It said, "Girl 3:45 a.m. 8 pounds, 11 ounces 20 inches." I kept that paper for years. When my mom died, I went to our documents safe where we kept it, but it was gone. Make sure to like and subscribe while watching these awesome animals.